Hi everybody and welcome back to Greater Manchester Stories. This episode's amazing guests are two people who are campaigning on the new problem of cycle lanes that have floating islands next to bus stops, which are a danger to many people, but especially people who are blind. So first of all, let's welcome Sarah Gayton and Kevin Greenan to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you.
My first question to you, well, first of all, for people watching, we've got IT issues and Kevin couldn't get on the screen, so he's talking to us through a phone, which is absolutely fine. But first question to you, Kevin. I've seen the ones on Oxford Road in Manchester City Centre, and when I saw them a couple of years ago, I automatically went, these are crazy. We've got people getting off a bus straight into a bus lane, and we've got cycles going 30 miles an hour. And if you're a mum getting off a bus with two kids, you can't control your children all the time. And I didn't even think about people who are partially sighted or blind. So what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, Nick, just to put you in the picture, I have no sight, so I'm totally blind.
No.
Now, I have actually experienced the crossings on Oxford Road. Sarah and I did some work with that some years ago. And the thing is, we were at a bus stop, and the cycle lane was there. I stood on the crossing while Sarah did some filming, and several bicycles passed. And the only reason I know they passed is because she actually informed me. I did not hear any bicycles. With the traffic on Oxford Road, or indeed any of these cycle lanes, you do not actually hear the bicycles. And that is a huge impact for me, because it has denied me my independence. The impact is such that if I'm at a bus stop, I don't know if the bus is coming. I cannot communicate with the driver. I cannot put my hand out because it might be a lorry, it might be a truck, or it might be a car. And of course, if it's electric, well then where are we? But if I if a bus does stop and the driver shouts out the number, I still have to cross that cycle lane. I'm literally putting my life in my hands, because the majority of bicycles just go straight through. And that is a huge danger to me and other disabled people, not only blind people, wheelchair users, deaf people. I also have hearing aids. So people with dementia, anybody like that, older people, we all have a problem with this.
Yeah, absolutely. The question I've got is, haven't we spent the last 50 years trying to make our environment more friendly for people with disabilities? And when did the rights of cyclists start overtaking the rights of people with disabilities? When did that start to happen?
I think it was fairly recently when they sort of brought in this walking and cycling campaign. But unfortunately, cycling appears to have taken precedence, and pedestrians have been just left behind. And, they just have basically taken over the situation. And they are sort of not allowing us to carry out our day-to-day duties. Cyclists forget that they're in control of a vehicle, and therefore they should obey the rules of the road. There's nothing to stop a cyclist stopping behind a bus while people get on and just carrying on again. I'm not saying, cyclists, they have a right to cycle, and I'm not an enemy of any cyclist. And I can understand why they would have cycle lanes, but what they need to do is bring the bus back to the curb so that people can mount, board and alight safely. Because if we get on a bus or get off a bus, we've got to cross the cycle lane. And even getting off, what happens if a bicycle was to hit me and I was to fall back? I would then fall onto the step of the bus. And that's dangerous. But to answer your question, I don't know exactly when it happened, but when they brought in the new sort of the idea of walking and cycling, it's really cycling that has taken precedence rather than a sort of equality situation.
Yeah. The statement I'm going to make now, do you think I'm exaggerating this now? So if we build cities where people like you can't cross the road, is that the end of your freedom of movement?
Yes, technically it is.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I thought.
Independence is being taken from me, and it's causing more and more people to be isolated, which is a great shame, because people are entitled to get out. We're all breathing the same air, but some of us are being denied it because of the present situation.
Yeah, no, well said. Sever, let me come to you. For people who don't know the layout of these bus stops and cycle lanes, could you give us a bit of a description so people can understand what we're really talking about here?
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's two types. There's one where you literally get off the bus and step straight into the cycle lane. That's called a shared use bus border. And then you have to step, from the pavement onto the bus. So you're actually standing in the cycle lane. It's absolutely, it's so dangerous. It's not safe, and they should never have been allowed to be put into sort of Greater Manchester. And then the other type is what we call a floating island, or a bus stop bypass. So the actual cycle lane goes behind the bus stop. But again, you have to try and negotiate to get across the cycle lane that is not safe or accessible. And then the island itself, you're divorced from the pavement, you're divorced for asking help, if you needed it from a passing by person. And again, once you step off the bus, do you go left, you go right? It's not universal design. So when you get off a bus, you want to know you get step right, left, or right. You know exactly where you are. These floating islands are just not accessible, and they're not safe for blind and visually impaired people.
So it sounds to me as if for someone to get on the bus on one of these bus stops with a cycle lane, you have to run the gauntlet of cyclists. So you've got to cross the path of a cycle lane of cyclists going 30, 40 miles an hour. And even if you can see them or not see them, if you've got a cycle coming at you at 30 miles an hour, you've got a split second to get out the way. And that's if you're fully sighted.
But even if they're going at 10, 15 miles an hour, or even less, you still cannot get out of the way, and the majority of the cyclists are not stopping at these floating bus stops. They take the research from London, Transport for London, shows 60% don't stop. It's not again just cyclists, it's e-scooters, it's e-bikes, it's illegal e-scooters flying through these bus stops. So some of them might try and shout at you, but which way do you go? Which way do you move? Where are you? And the designs we've seen, and what Kevin's gone out and tried to use with his white cane, are just not safe and accessible.
Right. Kevin, let me come back to you. What are you trying to do about this, and who do you want to fix this problem?
Well, this is a bit sensitive, because at the moment I think we need to sort of leave politics out of it. But we need the bus stops. We need the buses to come back to the curb so that we can get on and off safely. Because at the moment, the way they are, it's just contrary to health and safety. So what I would like to see is the bus stops, the buses coming back to the curb where they used to stop. People talk about old school. Well, maybe old school to me is the best school, because it's a tried and tested method. And, there's no reason why the cycle lane should still be there. And the cyclists could stop behind a bus and allow people on, And when the bus goes, they can go. Okay, it might interfere with the continuality. It's a word. Continue with their continuation. But you know, a car has to stop at lights. So why can't a bicycle stop behind a bus to allow people to board and alight in safety? So that's the main thing. I'm not condemning cyclists, but I think they need to be more aware that we all have a right to use our streets. Pedestrians, motorists, and cyclists alike. We have to have some form of compromise. Surely, you know, stopping behind a bus for a few seconds isn't going to, you know, avoid, you know, I always think it's better to be a minute late than to arrive dead on time. And I think that's important. And if cyclists could do that and be a bit more understanding, and buses could come back to the curb where really they should be, I think we would have a much better life.
Right, thank you. And back to you, Sarah. When these are designed and these are implemented, councils have to do consultations. Were the blind community consulted over this?
In 2019, we did an emergency meeting in January over the Chorlton scheme, the whole scheme. And we put in a very detailed assessment to say if this went in, there'd be so many inaccessible bus stops and junctions and things like that, and totally against the Cyclops schemes. But we were being ignored. So, you know, we actually had a meeting. They provided a tactile plan so people could feel it, that couldn't see. And again, we've just ignored. We've also had a meeting in 2018, at that time with Chris Boardman. And again, then we explained about these bus stops, how inaccessible they were. There's a whole sort of pan-disability group in that meeting. But again, none of those concerns were taken on board. We had meetings with legal teams in Greater Manchester Council. I think it was Greater Manchester Council. Again, giving them evidence to show, you know, in Denmark, those shared use bus borders where you step off straight into the cycle lane, that when we found data to show that before they were put in, there were 5 crashes between cyclists and bus users. After it went up to 73, we gave them evidence to show that in Islington, a shared use bus border had been taken out. But again, all this evidence has been ignored. And you've now got these designs in the street in Manchester, Greater Manchester, and they will be causing discrimination.
Yeah, no, absolutely shocking. Back to you, Kevin. I'll give you the last word on this. What are your general thoughts on this now?
Oh, my general thoughts are at the moment, after doing some work with Sarah last week, I could not use these crossings. Now, I don't know if you've seen the Cyclops ones on Chorlton, on the Ballamore Road. We did quite a bit of work on those, and there's just no way I could handle them at all. In fact, I spoke to my local mobility officer in Rochdale about this, and I asked him about training on a Cyclops. He said his first reaction was no. He said you would need an awful lot of training because they are very, very difficult and they are extremely confusing. And, you know, any older person would have a huge problem. Anybody with dementia or anything like that would really struggle. And of course, blind people struggle. I totally struggled on that the other day, and I just couldn't use them. They need to go back to the drawing board and sit down and actually reconsult, and this time have us at the consultation and sit down and listen. It's okay hearing what we're saying, but they need to actually listen to what we're saying, because to me, these crossings, they're not progress. They're just not progress because we can't use them. And when they talk about the B network, Well, at the moment, to me, it may be a wonderful B network, but to me, it's inaccessible. And I would like to be able to use it. I would like to be able to go out, mix with my peers and other people, and be able to use public transport in the way that they can. It's not a privilege, Nick. It's not a privilege. It's a right.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget the B network is subsidized by your council tax. So you're actually paying for the network itself.
I know. And they're wasting it. They're wasting my council tax on these crossings. Now, if I was to waste it, what would they be saying? They said, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. How can they afford to waste it?
Yeah, it's many reasons. One of them is incompetence, and that's most of our public sector now, unfortunately. But thank you, Kevin and Sarah, for coming on and raising this really important issue.
I did make a comment once to somebody, and I just pulled it out of the air, and it was the most high up people make the most low down decisions.
Yeah, and part of that is because they don't live the same lives as me and you.
No.
Yeah, they don't understand how my life is. They don't understand how your life is. They think they do, but that's the problem. They only think they do, but they don't understand the nitty-gritty. They don't understand how it impacts normal people trying to run their own life and go about their daily business. They don't understand.
Exactly.
Thank you once again. It was lovely talking to the pair of yous, and hopefully I'll have you back on, but we'll get our IT working better so we can see the pair of yous and we can discuss some more of these issues, because it's not just these cycle lanes. There's lots of things here that you guys are pointing out what's wrong. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
No, so thanks very much, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.